Thank you, everyone, and welcome to our second session of our bioregional mapping workshop. Um, and today we're looking at how to map your bioregion. I thought before we started that it might be nice actually just to sit and enter into the space with a nice grounding exercise. So please, wherever you are, find a comfortable seated position. If you're sitting on a chair, place your feet flat on the ground. Um, through your feet, feel that connection of your body and the earth beneath you. Gently close your eyes or soften your gaze. And then just together, let's just take a deep breath in through your nose and slowly exhale through your mouth. And again, just inhale deeply, exhale slowly. Now, bring your attention to the points of contact between your body and the surface supporting you. Feel the solidity beneath you, offering support. With each exhale, imagine releasing any tension or distractions, allowing yourself to settle more deeply. With each inhale, draw in a sense of calm and presence. Visualize roots extending from your body into the earth, anchoring you firmly, connecting you to this place. Take a moment to appreciate this connection. I'd like to start today with a quote from my friend Cheryl Chen, who works with Salmon Returns and Salmon Nation collabs and is one of Regenerate Cascadia's closest partners. Starts. What does it mean to be a bioregion? To not just say we are, but to be it. It's not lines on a map, but instead, how do we think, act, love, flow like a bioregion? What does that mean and look like to embody bioregionalism as a state of mind and a way of moving in the world? How do we think and act like a watershed, a river, a mother tree, a salmon? How can we use these things as our guides to learn from their deep wisdom and show us how to be connected, to share in the abundance and find our way back to the life-giving flow of reciprocity? How would that start to transform the way we relate to each other, to create new networks, to recognize the bigger we, to say yes and more, to make decisions from a place of abundance, and know that all we have is each other, yet everything we need is here? It is in honoring this that we can flow the power of self-determination and resources to those rooted in place. Because when you get lost, locals always know the way. So this is just an offering to meditate on. That as we go back to our daily lives, that we know we are part of a living fractal of this bioregion, which ties us together, and that the future looks so bright and hopeful when we think of all the ways and will remember and bring back to life what it means to be a bioregion. So, with that, when you're ready, gently bring your awareness back to the room, wiggle your fingers and toes, open your eyes, and we can jump in. So, just to start, I thought it might be nice to begin with an opening activity. If you can, just take a minute, find a pad of paper, a pen. If you're on a computer and are comfortable searching for things, feel free to use your computer. But while it's helpful, feel free to start to take notes or draw as I'm reading this. And in this activity, I would like for people just to find their rivershed, their watershed, their river basin, and start by imagining the drop of rain that lands outside your home. Where does it go? Down a street, into a storm drain, through a forest, or into a creek? All water eventually joins a river. That path defines your rivershed, the land area where all water drains to the same point and system. To start, just take a minute to write, sketch, or reflect on this. Trace that path that it takes. And while we're doing this activity, let's start to think, what is upriver from you? What ecosystems, industries, and communities are above you that you need to think about? Where does your drinking water come from? On that same note, What is downriver? Who else is impacted by what happens in your place? Where does your wastewater go? How does water move through your area and what does it carry with it? I'd love for all of us just to take a minute and find the answers to your questions. What are the layers of life in your rivershed? Your soils, your forests, roads, fish, people, farm, infrastructure? Who are the people that need to be included in this conversation about water and land? Who are the largest impactors that we think about? Landowners, polluters, planners, stewards, who must be invited into this conversation if we want to think about systemic change. And to start, I thought we could just take a couple minutes and maybe just jot down your notes. It'd be really wonderful to name your rivershed. Think about what is upriver, what is downriver, and when you're finished, feel free to share your answer into the Zoom chat. Yeah, wonderful. So just maybe take another 10 or 15 seconds, bring the exercise to a close, and then when you're ready, feel free to share anything that you've learned or your activity in the chat. So I really love this exercise because in one sense, it's very simple, but it can also become very complex. And I think it's always really interesting because actually a lot of people really don't know the answers. And this is where I think a lot of our investigation can start. So, um, so for myself, I live in Seattle, but the watershed I grew up in actually was the Cedar River watershed, which starts in the North Cascades from an aquifer, flows down through several lakes, through several rivers, through Lake Washington, which connects to Lake Union, goes through a series of locks and then out into the Puget Sound, which is part of the Salish Sea. And so that can kind of help us start to think about these nested scales. And bioregions and bioregionalism at its root is really just about what is upriver from you and what's downriver. Where does your water come from and and the systems that impact your life? Where does it come from? And then when you're done with it, where does it go? And when it goes somewhere else, who else is it impacting? And how are you being impacted? And then it's all about just creating these systems that can share that those who are most impacted by a system can also have the most influence over those questions and answers. So, what is a bioregion? Unlike arbitrary lines on maps, bioregions exist right now. Look at a map of the Earth from space. Find where you live, your rivershed, your bioregion. Sit and look at it. And what shapes do you notice? What features? And how does that impact or change where you live? The wind, the rain, the soils, the animals or forests. A bioregion at its most basic simply means life place. It is a whole system way of mapping a region based on the interconnected physical, ecological, and human cultures and ways of living that have risen from that place. While bioregions are reflective of the way that humans have predominantly lived throughout human history, in Western academic sciences, this term bio comes from the Greek bias, life, the French region, and itself from the Latin regia, territory, earlier regere, to govern. Etymologically, bioregions means life territory or place of life. Every person, animal, plant, or creature lives in a bioregion. We can map bioregions as they relate to the life places of human communities within them, or talk about the bioregions of plants or animals. Bioregions include both land and marine ecosystems and are the largest scales where connections based on these physical realities will make sense. Unlike many maps, bioregions are not just created with simple lines on maps. Rather, they emerge from the realities of place, of many different layers of stewardship coming together to help shape the curves and flows of life in a place. They include the oldest stories of place, the jagged edges of continental plates jamming into each other, subduction zones, fissures, fractures, and mountain ranges, and how and and then looking at how does that guide the energy of a place? Rain, wind, soil, ecosystems, plants, migratory patterns, animals, fish, and how things grow and change over the seasons. And from that, how human cultures have grown and adapted to live in the unique context of that place. A bioregion is simply a whole system lens for answering that question. Layers of information, larger ecosystems, smaller riversheds, larger riversheds, ultimately bioregions. And at each layer, finding the different forms of stewardship and frameworks that we need to think about and how they interrelate and are interdependent that we need to consider and think about. Through layers like geology, water, weather, culture, we begin to see the patterns of connection that define a life place. From these, we can establish bioregional frameworks, methods for accountability and responsibility, which can guide our policies, choices, and ways of living. Bioregions are not static, rather, they are alive and can shift or change as internal and external boundaries change. Before I go too far into bioregions, I also just want to say, why is it important to have a shared definition of bioregion? Why do definitions matter? And I really actually like this kind of conversation with Neil deGrasse Tyson. Um, and so just as interest in bioregions and bioregionalism grow around the world, I think that we are in a unique moment. People are discovering this idea, many for the first time, and bringing their energy, passion, and creativity into it. This is exciting and needed, but if not carefully tended, can also lead to confusion and fragmentation. Without a shared context, history of where the term comes from, or a common definition, the term bioregion can become vague, inconsistent, or disconnected from the history and principles that have shaped it. There are many things a bioregion is not. An arbitrary line on a map, a nation state, a province, a single ecosystem or ecoregion within a rich tapestry of ecosystems, a county, a city. The word bioregion has meaning. Many maps can be bioregional without necessarily being maps of bioregions. I really like how Neil deGrasse Tyson talked about this similar framing in his podcast on Freakonomics on Star Talk when he was talking about how they kind of came to the naming of Pluto. So I thought I would just kind of share this for a moment. This is an interview excerpt between Tyson and Levitt, who's the host of Freakonomics, and just talking about that talking about Pluto. And so Tyson starts. In 2006, an official vote was taken of the International Astronomical Union. It's just the group of international astrophysicists which has a nomenclature committee to adjudicate this sort of thing. And they officially sent Pluto from a planet status to a dwarf planet status. And I think Pluto's happier there, actually. To which Levitt responds, since when is science done by a vote? Imagine if they voted on whether Darwin's theory was right or Copernicus' theory was right. Number one, they would have voted the wrong way, to which Tyson interrupts. We're not having a vote on what science is true or not. We're voting on nomenclature. You really can't communicate unless everyone knows what the nomenclature is. If you discover a comet, what are the rules for naming a comet so that there's consistency? What are the units of measure we should use when we're talking about this phenomenon in the universe versus that? And to the question of what was giving the word planet was never formally defined since ancient times. If I say dwarf planet, you will know the object is large enough to be spherical because gravity makes that happen, but not so large that it owns its own band around the sun. There are thousands of other objects orbiting the solar system at Pluto's distance. It does not command a space the way that we're used to calling or we're used to seeing planets do. Henceforth, Pluto's a dwarf planet. There's an asteroid called Ceres, which is big enough to be a sphere. That got promoted from being an asteroid to a dwarf planet. Now, if you just want to call everything that orbits a star a planet, I don't have a problem with that. It just renders the word completely useless. And so the reason why I'm starting with this is I think a big part of us even talking about bioregions is that as a community and a group, we're coming to a shared definition and sense of what a bioregion is that's really rooted in the history and the way that we're using it. Naming matters. And so we get to be a part of how we do that. For Regenerate Cascadia and the Design School for Regenerating Earth, and across a growing network of bioregional movements globally, we are choosing to align around a shared definition of bioregion, not to constrain the idea, but to ensure it remains clear, coherent, and useful. Shared language gives us the ability to recognize each other, to build trust, and to organize across geographies and disciplines. Just like planets, we need shared categories, language, and principles to talk meaningfully about bioregions, whether human or more than human. Bioregions are not rankless, and while there are many maps that are bioregional, many are not actually maps of bioregions. And without this shared foundation, it's difficult to organize, collaborate, or regenerate the systems we depend on. With it, we have a framework for stewardship that can truly scale. For us here in Cascadia, we also just use a simple rule, which is called call it what it is. If it's a city, call it a city. If it's a watershed, call it a watershed. If it's an ecoregion or bioregion, call it an ecoregion or biome. If it's a bioregion, a whole system lens that includes at least one intact watershed, the regional ecosystems within that watershed, and that has been given definition and shaped by the people living there because it best represents the reality of that place, then call it a bioregion. Just for the purposes of today, and just in terms of Regenerate Cascadia and other ways that we talk about a bioregion, these are the four principles that we kind of use for helping determine what a bioregion is. When you're looking at a map and kind of wondering what sense of scale is there, feel free to always challenge it against these four principles. Um, is it big enough to be a bioregion? And if it's not, feel free to always go back to the drawing board, expand your lens and go a little bit bigger and bigger and realize that it's okay to have different nested scales that help make up a bioregion and that can be working together. The four general principles is that a bioregion is a land and water territory whose limits are defined by natural realities of a place and the communities living within it. It's the largest geographic limits where connections based on place will make sense. And this idea of also the land and water territory is very powerful. Bioregions don't stop at the shoreline. They don't stop at the water's edge. Rather, they flow into them. And so you need to look at that whole scale. For a bioregion, whether it's human communities or non-human communities, an area must be large enough to be self-reliant and maintain the integrity of its internal biological communities, habitats, or ecosystems. That could also be helping support an identity or the communities within it. We use watersheds and drainage basins as the building blocks of a bioregion, the rooms that kind of grow the house as the base map. We do this because nature acts on the scale of watersheds, ecoregions, bioregions. They can never be divided. And so, because biological communities and cultures are interconnected, that whole systems approach is needed. And lastly, all we're saying is that people matter. They're a part of helping shape our bioregion. It is up to the people and inhabitants living in a place to choose what is meaningful for them. What are the layers of stewardship important for that place? And what are the bioregions that they live? And so if we use those four different principles and you come up with a bioregion, that is acceptable. That's great. And we can work together. Yeah. So at the same time, as we kind of subdivide and go down the series of nested scales, we ultimately realize that the ultimate bioregion we live in is planet Earth. Every bioregion connects to every other bioregion through an infinite ecological series of and cultural relationships. Because of this, this is another reason why humans matter, because we need to define what is relevant for us, our inquiry, and really help shape bioregions we are trying to create. Every human, community, plant, or animal has a zone of life in which it not only survives, but thrives. That's why the concept of bioregions is not just about drawing boundaries, it's about creating bioregional atlases, containers that loosely hold many overlapping layers. Bioregions emerge from these relationships. They are not fixed lines on the map imposed by a small group. They are living systems revealed through place and time and iteration. When in doubt, I always like to ask, for whom does it bioregion? If you are drawing lines, cutting off layer after layer of information, you might just want to go back and revisit some of those notions. So what are the boundaries of bioregions? David McCloskey, when exploring the idea of bioregional boundaries, shared this great insight. While there are few straight lines in nature, there are many definite and powerful edges. Various ecotones, watershed divides, climactic zones, fault lines, and scarps. Careful attention should be given to such beginnings and endings. These dramatic turnings in the earth serve as clear and powerful articulations of diversity. Boundaries are not good or bad in themselves. Rather, they define the edges of things, places where different zones meet and collide. Boundaries are natural and often found as soft transition areas rather than hard-edged political lines on a map, such as where forest meets grassland, freshwater meets saltwater, ecotones, and many of these zones are often the most biologically diverse and productive parts of an ecosystem. Extending this lens, there are often many of these ecosystems along even a single major river, and many such rivers which will often make up a bioregion. The boundary is a convergent threshold where many layers intersect, located where several significant factors end or begin. Borders articulate the natural envelope of the place, its center and bounds, and link this diversity to the larger world. Unlike many borders in our world today, bioregional boundaries are not an abstraction given to a place. Rather, they are real physical features which can be seen, felt, measured, and tested. This principle extends into human systems, where edges, whether geographic or cultural, have traditionally served as neutral grounds for exchange, dialogue, and then negotiation. Rather than boundaries of separation, edges represent points of convergence and relationship. In this context, bioregional practitioners may see themselves as edge walkers, those who operate between systems, bridging sectors, cultures, and knowledge traditions. Whether in governance, finance, or cultural regeneration, transformation often occurs at the margins, where systems meet and new possibilities emerge. So some of the things that we look at when we start to talk about mapping a bioregion is starting with the hard boundaries. The defining features can often be fractured, hard edges. They include geology, topology, morphology, the primal forces, including plate tectonics, subduction zones, upthrust zones, fracture zones, scarps, fault lines, volcanoes, mountain ranges. From hard boundaries, we usually get the external boundaries of a bioregion. From these features emerge how the area is acted upon by other elements, rainfall patterns, watersheds, winds, sediment, erosion patterns, and how these harder layers kind of guide the flows of energy within a place. From these hard boundaries emerge softer ones, a bioregional layering that will create the ecoregions, the biomes, the ecosystems, and probably the things that we think of when we think of home. Our rivers, our forests, our streams, soils, animals, plant life. Some of these borders will still have hard edges, and others will blend from one ecotone to another. From these sometimes softer borders, we often define our internal boundaries and ecoregions of a bioregion. And lastly, human culture. How have we lived in a place and how do we impact it? This is an incredibly important part of mapping our bioregion. As of the 1990s, humans are now the second largest mover of dirt in the world, behind that of water and ahead of wind. One of the most important things that Peter Berg did when he adapted the term bioregion in the 1970s was to include humans back into their ecosystems as a keystone species, as a critical part of their ecosystem, rather than removed from it. Together, these three layers help create the framework for a bioregion and is the largest physical connection of scale that makes sense and the furthest extent of its watersheds. Because ultimately, every person and community living within a watershed must be able to substantively weigh in and contribute to those discussions which might impact them the most. So within that, bioregions have two distinct elements: scientific, defined by the physical landscape, the geology, topology, hydrology, plate tectonics, geography, erosion, rainforest, biological beings and ecosystems living within them, each distinct, each suited and evolved slightly differently, and cultural, the people and inhabitants living within a bioregion, the sum of our personal interactions and actions, our interpersonal relationships with each other that make an area distinct. It is the food we grow, what we eat, our sports, our music, the clothes we wear, our shared identity, our economy, government, and politics. And in this, we must ask, how does where we live affect these things? What are things we can each do that taken together will see the world shift into healthier ways and improve the well-being of our communities in our bioregion? Just to give a little bit of an example of this, I just want to share a little bit more about the Cascadia bioregion, my own home. The name Cascadia comes from 1975 by a University of Washington professor, Bates McKee. It was adapted in 1981 by one of his co-workers and colleagues, David McCloskey at Seattle University, who was a geographer, who first gave definition of Cascadia as a bioregion. This is an area as defined through our watersheds and the geology of our region, the Fraser, Snake, and Columbia rivers, as well as the temperate rainforests extending from southeast Alaska in the north to northern California, Cape Mendocino in the south, and then really all the way, and then from to the east, it's the Rocky Mountains, all the way from the Yellowstone caldera um, all the way out into the ocean. And it extends not just to the shoreline, but off the shore to the Cascadia subduction zone, which is really the geology and volcanism that gives our region its definition. And you can see that in the north, some of these transition zones is where the Cascadia subduction zone ends, where the Aleutian subduction zone begins. In the south, you can see the Cape Mendocino fracture zone. And that's where, again, these boundaries and plate tectonics shift. So, just to start, Cascadia is a bioregion as defined first and foremost by its geology. These tectonic movements created the Cascade Mountains, carved deep river valleys, and formed the Pacific coastal landscape that still defines our region today. Here you can see how all of this volcanism, the mountains, translates directly to the watersheds. The Cascadia subduction zone defines the deep structure of the Cascadia bioregion. Its long striations and vertical bands of tectonic activity formed through the slow subduction of the Juan de Fuca plate beneath the North American plate have shaped this region's spine through cycles of compression, uplift, and volcanism. This geologic process gave rise to the Olympic Mountains, the Cascade Mountains, to the Rocky Mountains, and all of the terrains in between. It leaves behind hard, jagged boundaries, the mountain ranges, the fault lines, the uplifted coastlines that become the outer edges of our bioregion, which then guide the movement of softer ecological flows, for how rivers trace fault valleys, fertile soils accumulate between ridges, and wind moves through passes shaped by tectonic shifts. For those of us who live in Seattle, we always like to say that Seattle is an hour away from Seattle because the traffic is so bad. But as many people know from different cities within Cascadia, it can be very easy to travel from north to south, and you can move very quickly. But moving from east to west through hills can become very difficult. And that pattern is mimicked over and over again, from a simple valley to a larger ecoregion like the Salish Sea to a broader bioregion like Cascadia itself. These uplifts also help really, I think, define our bioregional identity. We have so many different mountains that when we look out and we see, and it's almost like every different city has its own mountain range or its own mountains that it really has affinity and identity with. And so this helps shape our identity and where we live as well. Well, the geology and volcanism is the oldest story of Cascadia. I think one of the newer stories and the newest that has really given shape to this area and has really defined the Cascadia bioregion is the story of glaciers, going back about 12 to 15,000 years to the last ice age. And yeah, these last ice sheets fundamentally redefined where we live today through that geology, through that volcanism. But through the glacial ice sheets coming down, you can see how the Salish Sea was carved out by glaciers and scraped. You can see how these mega floods through ice dam after ice dam and flooding through these huge prehistoric lakes, I guess, um, would release and carved out the entire Columbia River. And you can see how these sediments pooled into the Willamette Valley, which is now one of the most fertile basins and growing in agricultural areas in all of in North America, along with like the San Francisco and the Bay Area deltas and other areas like that. That wetland, that soil, that accumulation, all of this gives rise to how we live today and our current situations. And just to say that with glaciers, it is like I think one of the coolest things about this is that it has done an amazing job just carving these fjords and really hewing the rock into these deep river valleys and really moving and scraping the soil. So within this, now because of we've looked at the geology and the volcanism and the glaciers, you start to see these patterns repeat over and over and over again. So this is Cascadia as we look at different wind patterns and how it guides the flow of wind during storms. We can look at Cascadia and the patterns of forest covers, how these different areas shape where our forests grow and the type of ecosystems there. Also notice how stupid it is to cut this off at the US-Canadian border. We can also look at how this affects our rainfall and annual precipitation and how that guides how we live, the agriculture we can grow, what energy you might want to live within and produce. You can also see how this affects salmon and watersheds and different ecosystems within where we live. You can see how this then impacts the traditional territories of indigenous peoples who have lived here since time immemorial, and has helped shape the culture of people who live within this place. Today, you can see how this affects our current cultural and bioregional patterns. We can talk about how we talk and who we communicate with. We can look at how we spend our money. And over again, these regional areas, bioregional areas defined from the places that we live emerge. This is a map of, they're called mega regions, right? So clusters of populations that live and work together that have these connected cultural, economic, and political corridors. You can see how this affects itself in sports and other different forms of cultural identity, music. You can see how it's a conversation that we need to start having when we start talking about how are we getting our power and our energy and where does that come from? You can see that this is an important conversation to have when we start talking about disaster preparedness and emergency management, because no one state or province is going to be able to deal with this problem alone. And these wildfires and where they're coming from and how we deal with it needs to be part of a bioregional discussion and is rooted from all of the different layers that we've just talked about coming together. And within that, one of the things that we can talk about as we talk about bioregions is really thinking about things in terms of nested scales. I think Joe talks about this beautifully in his presentations, and so I won't go too far into it, but I'll just say for Regenerate Cascadia, some of the different scales that we've really started to use, as we call them, at its largest, we could start with the planet, and then working our way down, we go to continent, to bioregions, and maybe there's some type of intermediary in there too, because sometimes these areas can get really big. So maybe we need other types of ways of working together. But then also we have major watersheds, regional ecosystems, smaller watersheds, and lastly, this idea of discrete landscapes, our home, the watersheds of which we live, and it's the scale on which we can walk out our front door and take action about the things we care about. Another thing I just want to touch on briefly is this idea that humans, it is important to include humans as part of our bioregion. It was the whole reason that bioregions were kind of defined in the 1970s by Raymond Dossmann, was to bring humans back into the equation, as opposed to earlier maps he had made of biotic provinces and biogeography that were ecological maps, but that really ended up excluding humans from it. So we have an incredible impact on the places that we live. We alter our landscapes, we alter our watersheds, and we change the flow of water. And so we need to have real conversations about bioregional framework and holistic watershed management and planning, where we're doing that together. For example, this is a map of the Colorado River, which now, due to human use, is draining the aquifers. And then also where we've actually pulled aqueducts that pull things out to different, cities that use it for different purposes. So that the Colorado River rarely reaches the final destination of its natural watershed. The Colorado River also is a good example of, again, how these rivers cross arbitrary state and political borders, how they cross arbitrary national borders, and how we need to be working together along every different community that's involved or impacted by these decisions needs to be a part of this decision-making process. I also just want to say that another critical part of bioregional mapping is the inclusion of non-human inhabitants. Every plant, animal, or species lives within a bioregion, or more accurately, within a web of interconnected and interdependent life, where it not only survives, but thrives. These bioregions emerge from relationships between species with ecosystems and through the physical and biological conditions that support life. They are not fixed lines on a map imposed by a small group. They are living systems revealed through a careful observation of place. Rather than viewing bioregions solely through a human lens, we can and must examine them through the perspective of other living beings as well. A bioregion in this sense is the total system of interactions and conditions in which a specific community or community flourishes. Whether we are mapping the migratory corridors of salmon, the breeding range of humpback whales, the overwintering zones of monarch butterflies, we are applying the same whole system principles. The four criteria used to define human bioregions, territorial coherence, ecological integrity, watershed continuity, and cultural agency, can also help guide how we understand and protect bioregions of non-human species. The key is specificity. We must be clear about which species, populations, or ecological communities we are referencing and map accordingly. Just to give an example of this, this is the bioregion of Pacific humpback whales. Humpback whales in the North Pacific undertake extensive migrations between feeding grounds in Alaska and breeding grounds in Hawaii, Mexico, or Central America. In winter, they migrate to warmer southern waters to breed and give birth, fasting during this period and relying on stored energy. Their bioregion encompasses vast marine corridors, highlighting the need for conservation efforts that span international boundaries and protect critical habitats along their migratory routes. One of the coolest examples of two people doing this would be the communities of Haida Gwaii and communities in Hawaii. And they are looking at creating these marine sanctuary zones that extend that both work within the context of nation state frameworks and traditional protections, but are actually creating a new intermediary for bioregional marine protectorates from Hawaii to Haida Gwaii that would actually help protect this bioregional corridor. So how about this area? Is this a bioregion? And the answer is maybe. And I think I'll leave it up to the people living here and maybe depending on the purpose to answer that. I think just as important as trying to say something's a bioregion or not is it's just as important to ask, for whom does it bioregion? Here, maybe a good example would be the southern resident orca whales, whose primary range is within the Salish Sea. But what do orca whales reside on? Their diet is composed almost entirely of Chinook salmon, making them highly specialized predators. As a keystone species and apex predator, the health of orca populations reflect the health of the entire marine ecosystem. Chinook salmon, in turn, rely on forage fish like herring, sand lance, squid, Species that themselves feed on zooplankton, which depend on phytoplankton, which is the foundational level of the marine food chain. Just to pull this all back, if we're talking about Chinook salmon, there's nothing more beautiful about the important role of looking at this whole bioregional lens picture. Chinook salmon not only live in the Salish Sea, but now we have to start talking about the Fraser River, which is the largest river and largest source of fresh water that flows into the Salish Sea. How can you talk about the Salish Sea as a bioregion without including the largest river? Chinook salmon swim up further as far inland as the Columbia and Rocky Mount, or sorry, the Rocky Mountains, the Columbia ice sheets, reaching as far as Jasper and Banff. If salmon habitat is degraded or blocked upstream, or if forage fish populations decline due to warming waters or pollution, orcas will suffer. The Fraser River is the single largest source of fresh water to the Salish Sea. It contributes approximately 46% of all of the freshwater output into that system. The fresh water from the Fraser River mixes in right through Vancouver, BC, and mixes with the saline waters of the Pacific Ocean, which creates an incredibly nutrient-rich, brackish environment that supports a diverse array of life in this area. This mixing process then is completed by salmon, because salmon play a critical role in the nitrogen and nutrient cycling of Cascadian ecosystems, acting as the vital link between marine and terrestrial systems. When salmon return from the ocean to spawn in freshwater systems, rivers, and streams, they bring with them all of their nutrients that they got from the ocean, and especially nitrogen and phosphorus that are scarce in inland environments. After spawning, they die. Their carcasses decompose and are distributed across the landscape by scavengers such as bears, eagles, and other wildlife. This process transfers rich marine nutrients into riparian soils, enhances the fertility of forests and microbial life, understory plants, and trees. Studies have shown that trees along salmon-bearing streams can receive up to 25% of their nitrogen from these ocean-derived sources. This nutrients input directly supports the growth and contributes to the long-term productivity and resilience of a watershed. And so now we're starting to think in terms of not just single layers on maps, but the actual flows of what it means to live in a life place. And now we're thinking about bioregions and that web of life, of food chains, of interconnection and interdependence. Lastly, just to bring in the picture of humans, the Salish Sea, humans have an incredible impact here. And so we need to think about this as a shared system. And yet we're also creating a mega region. And so we're redefining these boundaries, which maybe traditionally have been bioregional, but because of human intervention, we now need to start to broaden that lens if we're talking about human cultures or human communities. So is the Salish Sea enough of a bioregion to encompass this life place, or do we need to zoom out and recognize that the orca bioregion might be defined by a much larger system, spanning rivers, estuaries, ocean currents, and the full cycling of nutrients and energy across land and sea? So that's mostly it. But I just thought I would bring this in to a conversation a little bit. Um, it was fun. I know that people oftentimes are really curious about the One Earth bioregional navigator, which is a wonderful tool that was developed by, I think it's Carl Burkhart and One Earth. And it's a wonderful navigation tool for looking at different ecological areas and regions as defined through Earth. But it's interesting because they have chosen to call these bioregions. And so I'll just kind of lead with a series of questions or kind of thoughts that pop into my mind when I look at this map. Um, because it's nice to have this tool where people can just go and click in and it's easy and you're like, here's my bioregion. But are these bioregions? And I think I guess I kind of always go back to just the idea of maybe, but I guess for who and like who made these maps for what purpose? And just with this thing and notion too, that right now a lot of people tend to confuse ecological maps with bioregional maps. And those two things are slightly different. Um, I think, the One Earth map is a valuable tool for understanding these global ecological patterns. It maybe doesn't fully capture the essence of a bioregion. Um, Instead, the One Earth bioregional framework, as shown, delineates 185 regions uh, through intersecting, you know, well, anyways, I'll just say it's a very academic approach, and I think more or less, it's easy to confuse ecological maps with bioregional maps. Ecological maps are bioregions, but they're not necessarily maps of bioregions. And a big part of this is because ecological maps oftentimes don't include human communities or that whole kind of watershed lens and picture. So it is one of the lenses, and it's incredibly important and valuable for helping us protect our ecosystems, talk about different ways that we can be stewarding it, talking about different protections for those areas. But I'm always very curious on for whom does it bioregion? What are the specific species that we're talking about in these places that live in that area, right? And that don't stretch beyond those borders. Who is making the map, I think, is also just as important as the map itself. And so our local communities being consulted through this map of bioregions, right? What about indigenous cultures and communities who have lived in this place? And with the One Earth Navigator, I think it's important to realize that they're not a part of that map. And so while it's a wonderful map of ecoregions, um, it can be a little bit dicey or tricky to call them bioregions. And again, just going back to, I think, also just call it what it is. If you look at the One Earth map of bioregions, it uses this Resolve, I think it's like Resolve GIS layer for all of its interactive mapping, which is just a map of ecoregions. And I think it's a mix of type 2 and type 3 ecoregions, which again are just areas that have similar climate, geology, and soils. But are these bioregions? And maybe people think that they are, and it works for them and define it there too. And that's fine too. But those are just some of my thoughts, kind of when we talk about it. And I think I always just kind of go back and I'm always really interested in looking at sources. And when you start to look at the sources, you realize that the way that One Earth and some others in academic sciences are talking about bioregions, it's different from the way that a lot of the bioregional movement or the things in the design school, the way that we're talking about bioregions, that they just kind of call everything in kind of a rankless sense of bioregion. But then you start looking back at their sources, they're just talking about ecoregions. So again, I just want to make that distinction a little bit clear that while these are very valuable bioregional tools, um, I do question a little bit of are ecoregions bioregions? So they are certainly the way I usually think of it, the rooms in the house that help create the envelope for what a bioregion is. So I just wanted to share that a little bit. And I think it's also really important then to go back to this history of where the idea of bioregion comes from. And this idea of lineage. And this is why I talk a little bit so much about lineage and other things, because there are other ways that people pull and start to use it. And quite often when people use the term bioregion, if they're not connected in with this lineage, they don't know what a bioregion is. And so they'll just call like their city a bioregion, or they'll call like I've seen people call this their state a bioregion. I've seen people say the United States bioregion, right? Or eco zone or something. And it just kind of misses it. So I just wanted to kind of go back to that lineage of when we talk about bioregionalism and bioregions, we are really rooting into this movement that's been growing for many decades and that really emerged out of the 1970s through the work of Peter Berg and Raymond Dossmann with the Planet Drum Foundation. Before that, through Alan Van Newkirk, is the one who really thought of this idea of envisioning a human biogeography that takes humans and puts it back in to the context of where they live. And before that, it's also the language of regeneration for indigenous peoples and cultures. um, as they've been living since time immemorial for thousands of years. And so it really is drawing on this beautiful lineage and in a shared context. And that can be different to the way that some people have taken it and used it in a Western academic setting or sense, which tends to be a little bit removed from that. Um, and this was really highlighted and defined. I think Raymond Dasman was a really incredible scientist and biologist and conservationist who actually helped create the term biotic province with Michael Uvardi in 1972, 1975. He created the Man and Biosphere program. And then from these maps, he felt like something was missing. And so him and Peter Berg actually got together, in 1977, and they wrote this first kind of critique or article about what a bioregion was. And so just to kind of name that, in their words, the term bioregion has been defined differently than in a strictly natural science sense. It refers to both a geographical terrain and a realm of consciousness. A bioregion can be determined initially by use of climatology, physiography, physiography, animal and plant geography, and other aspects of natural history, but the final borders are best described by the people who have lived within it through human recognition of the realities of living in place. Bioregions are only barely recognized in terms of how life systems relate to each other within them. It is still an anxious mystery whether we will be able to continue living in them as we have thus far. How many people can the bioregion carry without destroying it further? What kind of activities should be encouraged? Which ones are too ruinous to continue? And how can people find out about bioregional criteria in a way that they feel these exist for their mutual benefit rather than as imposed as a set of regulations? Many bioregional organizations of grassroots residents have formed across North America in the last 15 years to answer these and similar questions. Northern California is referred to as Shasta bioregion. And with that, I think I'll stop for here. But just to say that this was written, more than 50 years ago, 40 years ago. And this is the exact same conversation that we're having today. And so that's the tradition that I think we're inviting everybody into in the design school. And that's why it's so powerful to have people that are kind of all answering these questions. And with that, I would love to just maybe just take a pause. And that was just like a ton of reading and writing and kind of thrown at you. So I'd love to just maybe open it up for any thoughts or, um, yeah, comments. I mean, what's alive for you? And then what I'd love to do is actually give a space that we might break into groups for a little bit and just have some conversations where we talk about this as well. Yes, Marie.
Hi, Brandon. Thank you very much. I really love your presentations, got to say. Um, and especially this one because it follows upon me doing this deep dive presentation about the bioregion I wish to organize, which is the referred to in the English language as the English Channel, but in the French language as La Manche. And I was asked questions about why I saw it as a bioregion, and I kept coming back to an element that's more cultural than biological or physiological or geographical, which is that there are two lines of pilgrimage that are like incredibly ancient. We don't know how old they are on the English side and also on the French side. On the English side, they call the Saint Mary and the Saint Michael ley line. And also, I kept referring to the fact that there was remnants known and well-known remnants of the cultures that predate 10,000 years ago when the last snowball Earth ended, sea levels rose, and the channel was created together with the North Sea. So the North Sea was Dogoland, and the channel area was, well, a continuum between what we now call Great Britain and what we now call France, and that there were still remnants of memory of that in the cultures of Guernsey, Jersey, in the whole fact of the Norman invasion, which actually based itself on ancient connections between the people on the two sides of the channel for William the Conqueror to justify his claim and stuff like that. Anyway, so I was really interested to see that you made a big distinction there between ecoregions that would be like much more based on the geology, and then the plant and animal communities that come from that geology or from that, yeah, the physiological processes of the area, the climate, etc. Because there it really applies very strongly. So yeah, I just going to like dig more into what you said to continue building the case, especially because we're talking about two cultures that have a massive rivalry, England and France. And so there's need to build the case as to why this bioregion ought to be looked upon as a bioregion.
I think that's really beautiful. I also love what you brought up too. I mean, I think when we start to talk about the cultural route, the cultural side of it, it's so beautiful because you were talking, I think, about pilgrimage routes. And recently I was just learning about, and I really love, let's see here, I'll share my screen again. Um, I really love this. I was just introduced to this idea of a Maya bioregion. And this was such a beautiful idea because it's for the Maya people. More than I think 7 million of them still live in Central America. They lived here for thousands of years, and yet they're divided by several different, artificial nation state boundaries and borders, and have faced a lot of cultural repression, genocide, and yet they are just, yeah, incredibly vibrant culture, language. But one of the ways that they're growing this idea of the Maya bioregion, which crosses these boundaries and borders, is through what they call it the Jaguar, of the Jaguar route, and it's these pilgrimages that people will go that really helps bring people together through this identity. And so, this idea of pilgrimage and journey as part of cultural development of bioregions, I think, can be very powerful. Whether it's a watershed, a tour of a watershed, or from start to finish, or different projects, but that can really help connect people into the rhythms of a place.
Yeah,
Um,
that's interesting.
yeah.
That route that I talked about, they also carried stones, and it's the same as
Mm.
jade. They're very, very much the type of stuff that were carried a long way is like these indestructible elements, crystals, stones, things that is worth actually taking a long way.
That's wonderful. Ian.
Hey there. Yeah, this is very interesting subject matter to get into this morning. It really brought up in me this piece I've been sort of doing a little writing on about the era of the jaded environmentalist, and it really reminds me, especially near the end there, where you were pointing out the piece around who are the people that are making the maps is so imperative, and the piece that I was digging in recently is the sort of gentrification that happens when individuals who have become jaded against different certain aspects of usually human, trauma that humans pull back from, and especially elite people, maybe even in the science spaces, will do their hyper focus on the thing that they're interested in, and then they will be detracting their focus on the whole systems thinking, and this gentrification creates uh, a cognitive dissonance where there's not as much of a whole systems like even capacity to even let that land. And so it's very easy for, I think, a lot of people who are hyper focusing on their subject matter to forget about the other aspects, and it's a relational thing. So we need to be healing our relationship with the whole piece, and that's really hard when each one of us feel very solo on this journey in life. So I think that the only way we're going to get to a true bioregional map is through healing and trust with one another. So I think this is a great container we're in to do that with each other.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I think that's very powerful what you said. I love also the language that you're using around healing, healing our relationships with land, healing our
Mm,
relationships with each other. And then also, I think in academia, that it is important that I think, especially just the way it's structured, it's very similar to like in a lot of Western academia where it kind of keeps going as you graduate upwards, it gets more narrow and focused and you become more
mm,
specialized in a very specific subset. And yeah, we do have a tendency to hyper focus. And so how do we then just lift our heads back up and
mm,
reassert our gaze is a great question. And with the idea that we need all of it working together, right? We need the academia, we need the policymakers, we need the
100%.
map makers and geographers.
Mhm,
And I think that actually creates then a beautiful opportunity for the ways that we can be coming together to create, like you said, those new containers that we can be
mhm.
thinking about. It's great. Yeah. Adrian,
Yeah, I think what this brought up for me is that just the clarification of sort of, I keep looking for like the prime directive in all of this bioregioning stuff, or how to define that for ourselves. And I think that is the difference between this and any other kind of movement, is the integration of people with the ecosystems they live in, and in a beneficial, being a co-beneficial element in those ecosystems. And so with that purpose in mind, it really helps me, like, what kind of maps do we need to see that? What kind of data do we need to see how people can be co-beneficial elements of their ecosystems? But anyway, that was just an awareness that I um, came in. It's not. It's always been in my mind, but kind of came out of the clouds a little clearer, I guess.
I think that that's wonderful. Thank you for sharing. Pamela,
Yeah, thanks a lot, Brandon, because this is helping me to orient myself within on the watershed level of the small creek that runs through the ecozone that I'm in. And I appreciate what you were saying, Adrian, too, about um, the um, the beneficial aspect of human beings and in the regions where we live. And so what I was finding very helpful with this presentation was just how I was able to get a better sense of how, even just on the very small scale of this ecozone and the restorative work that's going on with the different creek sheds in daylighting and trying to just bring some life back to whatever areas are available for bringing even a modicum of life back into. Um, Helping to what we're noticing is that all of the underground creeks throughout this region are now starting to be conceptually daylit. And that provides then a kind of need for a story that connects watershed to watershed. And that's one of the things that I'm finding very helpful, because I'm starting at kindergarten in terms of looking, thinking, acting in this way. And this gives me a sharper focus and a sense of how to start asking what kinds of questions. So nothing much more than that, but for me, I feel there is tremendous benefit in hopefully being a stronger capable of contributing more coherently and impactfully where I appear with these other groups. So that's a wonderful thing. Thank you.
Yeah, I love everything that you're just I think that idea of as we are actually connecting and daylighting these creeks, which we've hidden away, we need help to create these bigger stories of how everything interrelates and connects together, and really so that we can hold that vision, not in these isolated silos. And actually, I'll take it back to um, the start of this workshop, and I think Jeff McNeely in the chat was like asking me, he's like, well, I live on Whidbey Island. It's like we don't even have any rivers and sheds or whatever. And so what does that mean? And I think this is just such a great opportunity that I would love to just invite people to really start to explore how we can even conceptualize what's upriver and what's downstream, and what does that mean. And you know, just to kind of give an example of where Jeff lives, he lives on Whidbey Island. And Whidbey Island is a part of a much broader ecosystem here in the Salish Sea, which I guess this isn't a good map, but Whidbey Island would be over here on the left. That's actually not here. But what I would like to highlight is that there's this other river right next to Whidbey Island, which is the Skagit. And the Skagit starts actually in Canada and then flows all the way down, and then it exits into Skagit Bay, which is this incredibly important and powerful force, which goes in between Whidbey Island, it goes between Camano Island, and then for how it interacts. And there's all sorts of other watersheds. And then the other really interesting one I think that Whidbey Island plays is this idea of a gateway to the San Juan Islands. And so at the north end of Whidbey is Fidalgo Island. And you have Deception Pass, which is this powerful place of moving waters. And so what's the connection between Whidbey Island and Fidalgo Island and Skagit? And traditionally, then you also have, it's the home of the Swinomish people. And the Swinomish have always lived they're the lower river people. And then you have the Skagit, and other people who lived, who were the upper river people who lived in the mountains and other things. And then they would come together and they had these different forms of trade and seasonal ways of living that they would do. And so all to say then of how do we then pull that picture? And not only that, but then all the power lines run through Fidalgo Island and Anacortes, and all the ferries to the San Juan Islands go out. So then there's just an interesting conversation there to really look at what are these relationships that we're developing that we need to have together as we're having these broader bioregional lens conversations.
And just one quick question, because it raises the question for me of how do we map groundwater? Because water is coming from different directions. Sometimes it comes from top, sometimes it's stored from rainwater and then comes through the glacial till, and sometimes, so what's your read? How do you fold in groundwater, which would be a Whidbey Island situation, I guess?
And I think that's probably a great question for, so I think people living on islands are these wonderful bioregional frameworks that have these natural boundaries. But yeah, I think water, whether it's saltwater intrusion into freshwater systems or just the use of water, is incredibly important. It's going to become more and more important all the time. And so a lot of people are looking at local county water districts, or really how we map and have those conversations. Because a lot of times it's not even being considered at all, or part of the conversation. Great. So with that, we're at about 10:50. Let me just share my screen one last time. So I created a group activity. We do not have time to do it, which is really too bad. But I would love to, I think next week, I would like to give time. We had about 15 or between 15 and 20 groups or people fill out information in the slides. And so I really want to start giving time for just people to meet together and really start talking about what are these different nested scales that you're a part of. Next week, I think we'll also start to talk about layers of stewardship, and I'll create a little bit more of a template that people can use to start filling in um, these different layers of stewardship for where they live. But I would love for, even if you don't see it, or even if we don't have time to talk about it, I did post this in the design school, so feel free to go look at it, think about these questions. I did create a new slide that I would love for people to think about if you're working with a group or a team for your location. And that's just to start also filling in the nested scales of where you live. So the watershed you're at, what's above you, what's below you, what whole systems exist in your area? Do you need to look bigger? And then just what ecosystems are you part of? And what other ecosystems exist along that entire rivershed? Um, and anyways, and so we will talk more about this next week. And then the other big focus that I'd really like us to start talking about is as we start to align around the North Star, the shared values, how we're creating these shared definitions around bioregions, is also what comes next. So what are we doing here in the design school? What are you doing, and a lot of that's going to be as we're coming together in these local groups or watershed groups or regional groups or bioregional groups. How are we starting to organize? And when we have these bioregions or bioregional frameworks identified that we want to work within, what are the next steps that we take after that? And so I want to talk a little bit about this idea of a global strategy for regeneration that we can start to think about. I'd also love us to start thinking about how we're starting to create these bioregional organizing teams, regeneration strategies as part of a larger picture. And then the next steps that some people are also thinking about, which is bioregional financing facilities and funding ecosystems that start to see people supported in ways that we need and grow, and then how we're all kind of working together. So that's some of where I'd like to kind of take it from there. And then also just to say, let's see here, I'll share my screen. I'm behind on posting my notes for this week, but I will be sharing several different articles and other things and that I found interesting around bioregions, including there's a really nice like interactive GIS website kind of using Esri that was created for the islands in the Salish Sea, which was recently shared, which I talked about last week a lot. I'll also be sharing, I think there's some nice activities, but I did find also this really nice presentation by David McCloskey, who released the Cascadia Cascadia bioregion map. And he's got some really nice talkings about like the steps that they took over the last 20 years to really create and all the different layers that really creates this bioregional atlas. And so I'll be sharing that in the design school. I'll create a notification for when that's there. And also, I think Anna has started to put together a list of different contact information for people. And so I think we'll also make that public as well so that people can just find people in their areas that they might want to work with. And then we'll just give a lot more time next week to let people work together and start to explore some of these questions. So with that, I think thank you everybody for joining us. And any questions or comments? We've got about 5 minutes left, and I'd love to just open it up as your space and time. Yes.
I just wanted to find out if we are going to also look at power, because it's such a central thing. I'm meeting it immediately as I start contacting people. It always strikes me that the first thing that comes up in their eyes, in their manner, in the questions they ask is, how are you going to impact my little power structure here?
Uh-huh.
So, and when you talk about territory, you talk about power anyway. So I don't know
Great.
if it's going to be part of this course, but I'm really interested in that question.
Okay. I think that that's a wonderful point. And then so within that, then maybe as we're really starting to have these conversations, how are we coming in support of all of the existing things in a landscape? You know, with the idea that we're not creating something new, we're not trying to come in with another or new power structure, but actually that people are doing incredible work in their landscapes right now, and they need to be supported. And so, how can we come in and then start to grow healthier systems of um, power and governance? So I think that's wonderful. And then do I see, is it Michelle? Did you have your hand up?
I did have my hand up, but I was actually looking for practical advice, and I think I just have to be patient.
Well, what practical advice are you looking for?
So I've been, by the way, I loved and watched the recordings of the first 3 sessions. And I found them so inspirational. I'm an artist, and I went
Mhm.
out and I dug up mostly paper maps of variety of helpfulness, like including road maps. And
Mm.
so I got like about 23, 24 maps that I created. No one you wouldn't want to, try to navigate on a canoe trip with my maps. But and then I mapped out one summer when my husband and I did all kinds of canoe trips, and I map out um foraging and things like that. So what I was looking for at a practical level, if it seemed like this GIS system might let me skip the challenge of trying to source out good reference maps that I'm kind of tracing with a China marker in order to trace them. But I ultimately work on paper in the end for the art. So I think this may be more detailed and more practical than the amount of time you got left.
No, I mean, I think this is always going to be a really interesting balance. And I'm actually really more interested in just actually working with this group even to figure out where is, where is the blending and usefulness of, from everything from bioregional, say, art maps that can really help inspire that are done all entirely in hand. Um, and through manual means to digital and interactive tools using Esri and GIS and all the rest of it. Um, and then where do we find that balance, whether it's story maps, and I think that there's going to be a lot of power in bringing the two things together. And people can, I think one of the things that's really powerful, I think, and most important about bioregional mapping is that no matter what, it's not abstracted from place. I think a lot of digital tools nowadays can become very uh, disconnected. And so it's really about how do we actually then use and start from the place, but then use it as a tool to connect people back into this and ground in place. Um, and so, we can talk about story maps, we can talk about interactive data layers and all the rest of it. And there's some really cool examples of that. Um, and then I think really it comes back down to that bioregional maps are meant to be used. And so how are we making maps that are effective and what are the things that we want to create or share as part of them? And yeah, and that's why I actually think it'll be really interesting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all the cards that people filled out last week and feel free to fill it out more, but we'll connect in with with Michael Trope, who's our GIS person from UW. And I'd like to just connect them because I think once you have those shape files, and then we do a little bit of an introduction into what are the layers that's possible, people can start to really think what's useful and what's usable. And once groups have those bioregional frameworks, um, your data sets and layers are infinite. But I think that there will always be a place for that. I think again also that process of community participation and empowerment. It's like inviting people into that is so important. And it's not like and it's not like we're changing the process. The process stays the same, but the answers might change depending on who's invited and how good of a job we do at actually creating a participatory container that can really empower people. So yeah, anyways, that kind of goes all over, but
Yeah, yeah, because people, like, if I bring a map someplace that's hand drawn, people are amazed, because the road maps and even, online maps, it doesn't give you so much that, like, so people come over and say, show me where this is, show me, right? So yeah, I think the art does pull people in. Thank you.
Yeah, I would just say that we'll share a link to this Islands in the Salish Sea, this ArcGIS thing that they just shared. And maybe Anna, would you like to share a link in the chat to it? But it's really cool because it was a hand-drawn done process, through this participatory process in the 1990s, and then they just updated and created this GIS map. And so it's a great example of looking at kind of that blending and being able to tell a story. And then they want to grow this and expand it through invitation for people to create their own maps and add to these atlases that can really help people reflect and redefine. And yes, maybe if I ever get organized enough, I'm happy to share a link to the Miro board, and can do that. I am trying to use that. Anything I have on that Miro board, I am trying to put into units into the design school. So in the next couple days, we'll try to get a lot of these articles and links, and especially also those YouTube videos up there, as well as cool activities. Like, I think I found a walkthrough for how to do, one of those seasonal wheels and other things. And so um, yeah, yeah. And with that, I think we're at 11:01. So thank you everybody so much for joining this week. I'll look forward to seeing everybody next week as well. And yeah, have a wonderful time. Enjoy the learning journey, and I'm excited to see what you all come up with.
Thank you, Brandon.
Thank you.